Roma, a 2018 film directed by Alfonzo Cuaron. The movie follows the life of a house servant in Mexico City and the family that she works for. It's an incredible movie, in my opinion, and it really highlights some of the interesting aspects of historical Mexico in the 1970s. So it works as a way to illustrate and highlight some of the more interesting aspects of modern Mexican history, which in my opinion is underrated and very interesting. But it also works if you know nothing about Mexican history or the Dirty War or Cold War Mexico, because it's just a great and emotional movie all on its own. Of course, I recommend that you watch it either before or after listening to this. I think the chances are, if you're listening to this right now, you'll probably like the movie. And one of the reasons I love it is that it's so simple. You could describe it potentially as just the tale of a house servant taking care of a family and having some bad luck, but it's really a case where the whole is more than the sum of the parts. There is so much history packed in here, and there is so much emotion and the memory of history that we've been talking about over the last couple of episodes. And in my opinion, it's just really well done. So definitely check it out. The movie opens with our main character, Cleo, who, as we said, is a housekeeper for a well-off family. She's cleaning the floor as an airplane flies overhead. We're introduced to her housekeeping duties, cleaning, laundry, cooking, picking up the kids from school. And as we're introduced to her day-to-day life, we get a great scene where, as Cleo is doing laundry on the rooftop, the kids from the family that she housekeeps for are playing with toy guns. And this scene with the toy guns foreshadows how violence is soon going to be seeping its way into Cleo's personal life. To the kids, the violence is fake, just a game to play to pass the time. And they don't get upset at the death that happens in the game, the fake death. They get upset when the so-called rules of the game aren't being followed. So earlier in the previous scene, one of the kids comes home from school and talks about how a soldier just shot a kid in the middle of the street for throwing a water balloon at his Jeep. And perhaps this fake gun game scene is a nod to the way that the PRI and the Mexican state rule using violence and intimidation as part of the so-called game. And as we know from 1970s Mexico and the history of the Dirty War in Mexico, the rules of the game are changing as far as how state violence is going to increasingly become a factor for ordinary people, not just in rural guerrilla areas of Mexico, but also in urban areas like Mexico City. And I think this scene is certainly in line with what we've been discussing over the last few episodes with the Mexican Dirty War. Again, the peasant movements and the guerrilla movements and the leftist revolutionary groups that we've discussed in the latest podcast series, that violence is slowly seeping its way into urban life in Mexico City, and it's seeping its way into the national consciousness of Mexico. And of course, we're going to see that with the two big student massacres, one in 1968 that we talked about in a previous episode, and the 1971 Corpus Christi massacre that's going to play a big role in this film. Now, as the movie progresses, I think one of the joys of the film is the process of discovering just how great Cleo is and just how great she is with the kids and just how important that bond is to both her and to the kids. We see that a little bit early on after the toy gun scene, and of course it just goes from there. But as close as they are, there is still also this separation. The family are obviously her employers, but they also share some key differences that make a real difference in Mexican society. Cleo is indigenous, while the family is white, European background, and these racial differences extend all the way back to the colonial period and the racial casta system, where indigenous people often were on the bottom socially and economically, while Europeans and mixed people were reaping the benefits of the law and of the economy and of society. The movie shows this invisible barrier of sorts in a couple different ways, but one way is through Cleo and her friend at times speaking an indigenous language that the family can't understand. It's clever filmmaking because it lets the audience know that there is a barrier between Cleo and the family, and as much as they may love and respect each other, that's still going to be there. To me, this is also one of the main themes of the movie, the idea of loving something that you may not truly be a part of and dealing with the emotions and life situations that come up as a result of that. So to me, one of the cool aspects of this film is that this idea connects with what Alfonzo Cuaron talks about when he says that he wanted to make something that was both a personal story and a universal story. There's a really cool shot at the end of that toy gun scene where the camera pans up and you can see like a dozen other house servants, just like Cleo, on neighboring rooftops doing laundry. And there's dogs barking and clothes flapping in the breeze. And it really helps give you this sense that although this movie is going to be about Cleo's journey, there are many, many, many more people going through exactly what she's going through. And as much as it's a personal story, it's also sort of a story of Mexico as a whole. There's actually a few different scenes in the film where this idea plays out, and you get these pan outs by the camera to reinforce the idea that what Cleo is going through is both a solitary individual journey, but there are a ton of other people going through it as well. We then move to a scene of the father of the family, Antonio, getting home, and he drives through some dog poop, maybe some foreshadowing there for one of the themes of the film, which is male absence and fathers not being present. You see it when the dad abandons the family. You see it when Furman and Ramon, and presumably many of the halcones who perpetrate a massacre, have similar stories later in the movie. And speaking of Furman, it's around this time in the movie that we get our first look at Cleo's boyfriend, and it is quite the look. Obviously, the scene with Furman's manhood swinging around probably seems obscene and unnecessary at first, but I do think it serves an important purpose in the film. Here we have Furman describing how he grew up basically as an orphan. He got in with the wrong crowd, he turned to drugs and alcohol, but ultimately found meaning in discipline and martial arts. We find out later this quote-unquote discipline and martial arts is this paramilitary group, the Halcones, or the Falcons, who are a PRI government-trained paramilitary group who will be used to inflict state terror on anyone opposing the regime. So I think we have what director Alfonso Cuaron perhaps is using to juxtapose what many think is masculinity: violence, aggression, self-discipline, sexual prowess. All of this stuff is expressed in the scene where he's lurching around, naked, swinging his spear, and all of this is juxtaposed throughout the movie with what isn't there, and what I think Cuaron might be arguing is actually masculinity. Stuff like being present, tempering the baser instincts, raising a family, taking care of all the things that happen after you demonstrate your sexual prowess and all of that stuff. And after all of that flash and newness wears off, do you still stick around? As someone said, if you want to be a man at night, then you have to be a man in the morning. And speaking of these themes of absent masculinity and reflecting on these questions of what sort of manliness and machismo really means, we get the father abandoning the family scene. You can tell the wife, Sophia, sort of knows what's about to happen, and it happens just like that. That's kind of it. He just drives away, flies to Canada, And that's how easy it is to bail out. And now the wife is left to take care of the family with Cleo, and now Cleo is left to clean the dog poop that is left behind, literally and figuratively, of course. We then find out that Cleo is pregnant with Furman's kid. She tells him at the movie theater. The movie in the background is appropriately playing a clip of a plane crashing. And within 10 seconds of her telling him and him registering it, in just brutal fashion, he literally just walks out of the movie theater and out of her life. And I think, again, you are getting this theme of how easy it is for a man to simply get up and leave, and how easy it is to exhibit the easy masculine traits of aggression and violence and sexuality. But once it comes time to do the hard, difficult work of staying around, being there, raising a family, we see two different men leaving in back-to-back scenes. It might be a good time to mention here that a lot of this movie is based on director Alfonzo Cuaron's childhood. He said that in many ways he wanted this movie to feel like a memory, and he is recreating a lot of his own childhood and a lot of his personal trauma growing up and putting it into this movie. So his father left him when he was a kid, and now he's kind of able to explore some of the emotions and some of the broader context that was at play all of those years ago for him. And of course, in the movie, the women are left to pick up the pieces and try to make the best they can of the situation. There's another great scene where Cleo tells Sophia that she's pregnant, and remember that through the first 45 minutes or so of the movie, Sophia is a little bit cold to Cleo. There's a few moments where she lashes out at her, or a moment where the family is watching TV on the couch with Cleo, and Sophia orders her to go do something, seemingly not wanting Cleo to be in on the family action, so to speak. You definitely get the feel of a employer-employee type of relationship here. And so as the audience, you're wondering a little bit how Sophia is going to react to this news that Cleo is pregnant. But here, Sophia handles the situation seemingly really compassionately. Cleo is worried she'll be fired for being pregnant, but instead, Sophia comforts her, asks who the father is, and takes her to the doctor to be checked. And now these two women share another bond, both women who have been abandoned by men. And you start to see that even though there are divisions in terms of race and in terms of class, this really is a family that is strong and continuing to develop throughout the movie. So Sophia takes Cleo to the hospital, and there's another great scene where a lot of things are happening all at once. Sophia is asking the doctor, who has a relationship with Antonio, if he knows anything about why he left or where he is or all these types of things. That doesn't go well. And Cleo, after getting checked by the doctor, takes some time to go look at the nursery where all of the infants are. Body language and nonverbal acting is doing a lot of work here. You can tell that she's very conflicted regarding her own baby, what it's going to mean for her life, and sort of what it means to bring another person into this life that she's going to be living and that she's already experienced. As you can tell, she's having that contemplation. An earthquake hits as Cleo is looking on. It puts the babies in mortal danger, and Cleo is unsure what it means or what to do in that moment. I'm not entirely sure what the earthquake means or symbolizes, but I think perhaps we have some foreshadowing going on for where things are going to be going later in the film, especially with how Cleo's pregnancy is going to end, and also in the broader context where we're at in Mexico and Mexican history. It's right around this point in the movie where, as the audience, we really start to feel this slow building, menacing feel and attitude that's sort of seeping in to the movie. And I think the earthquake does a good job of showing, again, how that terror and how that violence and how that menacing reality of Mexico City in the 1970s is going to slowly start creeping into Cleo's life and into Mexican history as a whole. So we're about halfway through the movie here at this point. Again, I really encourage you to go check this one out if you haven't already. The best parts of the movie, in my opinion, coming up in part 2 of Roma, coming next episode.